If you're watching this right now, you're about to have the moment where quantum physics stops being a confusing collection of weird phenomena and becomes one simple, elegant truth. Not because I'm going to teach you complex mathematics or abstract theories, but because I'm going to show you the one insight that makes everything, wave-particle duality, observer effect, entanglement, superposition, all of it, completely obvious. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Quantum physics will never be confusing again. Here's what makes quantum physics seem confusing. We're trying to understand it from within the wrong framework. We're using everyday reality as a reference point, solid objects, definite locations, cause and effect, and trying to force quantum phenomena to fit that framework. But quantum reality doesn't work like everyday reality. It works by a completely different principle. And when you understand that principle, everything that seemed weird, paradoxical, or impossible becomes perfectly logical. Can you feel it? That sense of being on the edge of understanding something that will make everything click. That's not just anticipation. That's your consciousness recognizing it's about to receive the key that unlocks quantum understanding. What I'm about to share isn't advanced physics. It's simpler than what you've been trying to understand. Because confusion comes from complexity. Clarity comes from simplicity. The one truth that makes quantum physics clear is this: reality isn't made of things. Reality is made of possibilities. Everything you think of as solid, definite, existing objects, particles, even you, these aren't things that exist in a definite way. They're possibilities that become definite only when observed. That's it. That's quantum physics in one sentence. And every weird quantum phenomenon is just a natural consequence of this one truth. Wave-particle duality. Not weird once you understand particles aren't things. They're possibilities. Possibilities exist as waves, multiple potential states. When observed, possibility becomes a definite particle. Observer effect, not mysterious once you understand that observation doesn't record what's there. Observation makes what's there become definite from infinite possibility. Entanglement, not spooky once you understand that separate things aren't separate at a fundamental level. They're all possibilities in a unified field. You've been trying to understand quantum physics by learning about each phenomenon separately, treating them as different mysteries. But they're not different. They're all the same thing, consequences of reality being possibilities instead of things. And once you see that, once you really get what it means that reality is possibilities, quantum physics stops being a collection of confusing phenomena and becomes one elegant, simple, beautiful truth. Write in the comments, reality is possibilities, because declaring this shifts how you perceive everything quantum physics describes. You're not just learning a concept. You're recognizing the fundamental nature of reality itself. Before we go deeper into what reality as possibilities actually means and how it explains every quantum phenomenon, let's validate that you already know this truth. You've experienced it directly. You just didn't have a framework for understanding what you were experiencing. You've had moments where multiple futures felt equally real, standing at a decision point, sensing that both paths exist simultaneously, feeling like you could experience either one based on the choice you make. That wasn't imagination. That was direct perception of reality as possibilities. Both futures exist as potential until your choice collapses one into experience. Quantum physics in your daily life. You've experienced things working out differently than expected in ways that felt like reality rearranged itself. You were certain the outcome would be X, but Y happened instead, and Y was better than X in ways you couldn't have predicted. That's because the outcome wasn't predetermined. Multiple possibilities existed, and the one that manifested was the optimal possibility from the field of potential, not the specific one you mentally predicted. You've had experiences where something you needed appeared through impossible timing or unlikely circumstances. The exact person, information, or opportunity showing up precisely when needed through coincidence that's too perfect to be random. That's reality as possibilities organizing around your need. The possibility that serves you becomes the manifestation because possibilities aren't random. They organize according to consciousness. You felt moments where reality seemed less solid than usual, where physical objects, your own body, or circumstances felt more fluid, more changeable, less fixed than everyday perception suggests. Those weren't altered states. Those were moments of accurate perception. You were sensing reality as it actually is. Possibilities temporarily taking form, instead of perceiving through the illusion that makes possibilities seem like solid things. You've experienced knowing something would happen before it did, not through logic, but through direct perception. That knowing didn't come from analyzing probabilities. It came from sensing which possibility was most likely to manifest from the field of potential. You were perceiving reality at the quantum level, where possibilities exist before manifestation occurs. And here's the ultimate validation. You've experienced yourself differently in different contexts. You're one version of yourself with family, a different version with friends, another version at work, yet another when alone. Not because you're being fake, but because you actually are different possibilities of who you could be. And which possibility manifests depends on context and observation. Even your identity is possibilities, not a fixed thing. Every single one of these experiences is direct evidence that reality operates as possibilities, not as definite things. You've been experiencing quantum reality your entire life. You just didn't have a framework that explained what you were experiencing. Now you do. And once you see that your direct experience has been showing you quantum truth all along, quantum physics stops being abstract theory and becomes a description of reality you already know. Now let's reframe why quantum physics has seemed so confusing up until this moment. It's not because quantum physics is inherently difficult. It's because you were trying to understand it using a framework designed for everyday reality, which operates by different rules. Everyday reality, the world of solid objects, definite locations, predictable cause and effect, is an emergent phenomenon. It appears solid because we're observing at the macro scale, where quantum possibilities have already collapsed into definite manifestations. But at the fundamental quantum level, reality doesn't work like everyday experience suggests. Using the everyday framework to understand the quantum level is like trying to understand the ocean by only looking at individual waves. You're missing the fundamental nature beneath surface phenomena. Here's what made quantum physics confusing. Every explanation tried to fit quantum behavior into a classical framework. A particle acts like a wave sometimes, and a particle sometimes. That's confusing because it's trying to describe quantum reality using classical concepts of particle and wave. But quantum reality isn't a particle that acts weird. It's a possibility that can manifest as wave-like or particle-like, depending on observation. Once you stop trying to understand it as a classical object and recognize it as possibility, the confusion dissolves. The famous thought experiments that make quantum physics seem impossible, Schrödinger's cat being both alive and dead, particles being in two places at once. These seem paradoxical only if you assume the cat or particle is a thing that exists in a definite state before observation. But if cat and particle are possibilities until observed, there's no paradox. Multiple possible states coexist as potential until observation collapses one into manifestation. Not weird, natural consequence of reality being possibilities. Even the mathematics of quantum physics, wave functions, probability distributions, uncertainty principles, confused you not because the math is inherently difficult, but because you were trying to interpret mathematical descriptions of possibilities using a framework designed for definite things. The math describes probability waves, fields of potential, and how they collapse into definite outcomes through observation. Once you recognize that's what the math is describing, it becomes clear instead of confusing. Your entire journey learning quantum physics has been trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, trying to understand possibility reality using thing reality framework. No wonder it was confusing. You were using the wrong interpretive lens. But now you have the correct lens. Reality is possibilities, not things. And everything you've learned suddenly makes sense. Not because the information changed, but because your framework for interpreting it shifted. All those hours struggling with quantum concepts, reading explanations that didn't quite click, feeling like you almost understood but not quite, that wasn't failure. That was necessary friction that brought you to this moment where you're ready to shift framework completely. You had to exhaust thing framework before you could release it and recognize possibility framework is more accurate. The confusion was preparation for clarity. And now clarity arrives. Not through learning more. Through seeing what you already learned differently, everything you studied is still true. But now you have framework that makes it all make sense. Quantum physics isn't confusing anymore because you're no longer trying to force it into framework. It doesn't fit. You're seeing it through framework. It actually operates by reality, as possibilities becoming definite through observation. Something is shifting in how you perceive reality right now. Not just intellectually understanding new concept, actually experiencing change in how your consciousness interprets what it perceives. Can you feel it? Look at something near you. Object wall your own hand. Notice how you're perceiving it. Normally, you perceive it as solid thing that definitely exists in specific way. But now knowing that it's actually possibilities temporarily taking form through observation, notice how your perception shifts. It's the same object, but it feels different. Less solid, more fluid, more alive with potential. That shift is quantum understanding, moving from concept to experience. Take a breath, deep one. And as you breathe, recognize this breath isn't predetermined thing happening to definite you. This is possibility field organizing into experience of breathing through temporary form you're experiencing as you. Both breath and breather are possibilities becoming definite in this moment. That recognition changes how breath feels more miraculous, more impossible, more quantum. Here's what's happening in your consciousness right now. You're transitioning from thing framework to possibility framework. Thing framework says solid objects exist definitely independent of observation, following predetermined laws. Possibility framework says fields of potential exist and observation collapses specific manifestations from infinite possibility according to quantum principles. These frameworks create entirely different experiences of reality. Thing framework creates perception of fixed world that you're subject to. Possibility framework creates recognition of fluid reality that responds to consciousness. Thing framework makes you feel limited by circumstances. Possibility framework reveals circumstances as possibilities that can reorganize. Thing framework makes quantum physics confusing because quantum behavior violates thing framework rules. Possibility framework makes quantum physics obvious because possibility behavior is exactly what quantum experiments reveal. Here's what you need to understand before we go deeper. This shift from thing framework to possibility framework isn't just about understanding physics better. It changes how you experience existence. When you truly recognize reality as possibilities, your relationship with everything transforms, not as belief, but as direct perception. You're not in fixed world anymore. You're navigating a field of infinite potential. And that recognition is quantum awakening. In the next section, I'm going to walk you through exactly how reality is possibilities, explains every major quantum phenomenon, wave, particle, duality, observer effect, entanglement, superposition, all of it. And you'll see how one simple truth makes everything that seemed impossible become perfectly logical. But first, anchor this shift. Feel the difference between perceiving reality as things versus perceiving reality as possibilities. Write in the comments, "I see possibilities," because declaring this shift consciously accelerates your transition from confusion to clarity. Quantum physics is about to become the simplest, most obvious description of reality you've ever encountered. 3 years ago, I had the exact moment where quantum physics stopped being confusing and became completely obvious. I need to share this because when your moment comes, and it's coming right now, you'll recognize it. I'd been studying quantum physics for years, reading books, watching lectures, trying to understand why particles act the way they do. I could repeat the theories. I could describe the experiments, but I didn't really understand. It felt like memorizing facts about mystery rather than comprehending truth. Wave-particle duality made no sense. Observer effect seemed impossible. Entanglement felt like magic that violated everything I knew about reality. Then I was sitting outside watching leaves moving in wind. And I had this thought, what if leaves aren't things? What if they're possibilities? Not as intellectual exercise, but as genuine question, and in that moment everything inverted. I stopped seeing leaves as solid objects that wind was moving. I saw a field of potential possibilities, of where leaves could be, how they could move, and wind as one of infinite factors that influence which possibilities manifest. The leaves weren't being moved by wind. Possibilities were collapsing into specific manifestations that included wind-influenced movement. Same observation, completely different perception. And then quantum physics clicked. Not gradually, instantly. Every confusing phenomenon became obvious. Wave-particle duality, not paradox. Particles aren't things that sometimes act like waves. They're possibilities. Waves of potential that collapse into definite locations. Particles when observed. Observer effect, not mysterious. Observation doesn't record pre-existing reality. Observation collapses possibilities into specific manifestation. There is no reality independent of observation, because reality is the process of possibilities becoming definite through observation. Entanglement. Two particles that have interacted aren't separate things that mysteriously communicate faster than light. They're interconnected possibilities in unified field. When you observe one, you're collapsing possibilities that include both particles. So both manifest in correlated way, not communication. Correlation through shared possibility field. Superposition. Particle isn't in multiple places at once, which sounds impossible. Possibility field exists everywhere until observation collapses definite location. Multiple possibilities coexist as potential. Observation makes one possibility definite. Completely logical once you stop thinking of particle as thing and recognize it as possibility. I sat there for probably an hour watching leaves and watching my entire understanding of reality reorganize. Quantum physics wasn't weird physics anymore. It was accurate description of how reality actually works when you see through the illusion that makes possibilities appear as things. Everything I'd been confused by became simple. Not simple like easy, simple like elegant. One truth explaining everything. What followed was complete transformation of how I experience reality. Not just intellectually knowing reality as possibilities, but actually perceiving it that way. And when you perceive reality as possibilities, everything changes. You're not victim of circumstances. Your consciousness navigating field of potential. Quantum physics stops being abstract science and becomes practical wisdom for living. That's what's available to you right now. Not someday after more study. Now through this transmission, the moment where quantum confusion becomes quantum clarity, where complex theory becomes simple truth, where what seemed impossible becomes obviously true. Subscribe to this channel, not for more confusing physics lessons, but for continued support in living quantum understanding. Once quantum physics becomes clear, you need guidance for applying that clarity to actual life. This channel provides that guidance through every video. Now, let me show you exactly how one simple truth, reality is possibilities, explains every major quantum phenomenon that's been confusing people for a century. Once you see this, you'll understand quantum physics better than most physics students, because you'll understand the underlying principle, instead of just memorizing behaviors. Wave-particle duality explained. Light isn't sometimes wave, and sometimes particle. Light is possibility field, wave of potential states. When you don't observe which path it takes, all possible paths exist as wave. When you observe which path it takes, possibility collapses into definite path. Particle, not duality. Natural behavior of possibilities. Unobserved possibility. How wave-like observed possibility. How particle-like observer effect. Explained. Observation doesn't just see what's there. Observation collapses possibilities into specific manifestation. Before observation, electron exists as possibility field. It could be anywhere within certain probabilities. Observation makes location definite. The electron doesn't have location before observation. Location becomes definite through observation. Not because observation disturbs electron, but because electron ease possibility until observation makes it definite. Superposition explained particle isn't magically in multiple places at once. That would be impossible for thing. But possibility field exists everywhere with different probabilities, in different locations. Multiple possible locations coexist as potential. Observation collapses one location into manifestation. The multiple places at once isn't particle-defying logic. The possibility field functions exactly as possibility fields do, existing as a spread-out potential, until an observation fixes one potential into reality. Let's clarify entanglement. Two entangled particles are not distinct entities, exchanging information faster than light. Instead, they are interconnected possibilities within a unified field. At the level of possibility, they are inseparable, even though they appear distinct once manifested. Observing one particle collapses the possibilities that encompass both particles, causing them to manifest in a correlated manner. This is not spooky action at a distance, but correlation through a shared possibility field that was never truly separate. Now, the uncertainty principle. You cannot simultaneously know a particle's exact position and momentum with perfect accuracy. Why? Because at the quantum scale, particles do not possess definite position and momentum waiting to be uncovered. They exist as possibilities. When you measure position precisely, you collapse the position possibilities into a definite state, which in turn causes the momentum possibilities to become more spread out. Conversely, measuring momentum precisely causes the opposite effect. This is not a limitation of measurement, but a natural outcome of making possibilities definite. The more precisely one property is defined, the more indefinite its complementary property becomes. Consider quantum tunneling, where a particle passes through a barrier it seemingly shouldn't cross. This is not a miracle. The possibility field extends beyond the barrier with diminishing probability. There is a small chance the particle could manifest on the other side. Most observations collapse the particle's manifestation before the barrier, but occasionally the collapse occurs beyond it. The particle did not tunnel through a solid barrier. Rather, the possibility existed beyond the barrier, and that possibility manifested. Regarding the collapse of the wave function, the wave function is not a physical wave, but a mathematical representation of the possibility field, encompassing all potential states in which the particle could appear. Collapse is not a physical event, but the transition of possibilities into definiteness through observation. The wave function describes probabilities, and observation actualizes one of those probabilities. This collapse marks the shift from a potential wave function to an actual manifestation. Every quantum phenomenon that once seemed strange, impossible, or paradoxical becomes entirely logical once you understand that reality is not composed of things, but of possibilities. These possibilities behave exactly as quantum experiments demonstrate. The only reason quantum behavior appears odd is because you tried to interpret possibility behavior through the lens of things. Once you perceive reality as possibilities, quantum physics ceases to be confusing. It becomes the most precise, elegant, and straightforward explanation of how reality truly operates that humanity has ever discovered. Now, let's identify specific signs that quantum understanding is resonating with you. As you read these, notice how many you already experience. This recognition confirms that quantum physics is no longer perplexing for you. Sign 1. Quantum phenomena now sound straightforward. What once seemed impossible or paradoxical now feels obvious. The idea that observation collapses possibilities makes perfect sense. Instead of sounding like nonsense, you think, "Of course, that's how it works," rather than, "I don't understand." Sign 2. You can explain quantum concepts to others. Genuine understanding reveals itself through the ability to explain simply. If you can describe wave-particle duality or the observer effect in plain terms that make sense, you're not merely memorizing, you truly understand. Clarity enables you to clarify for others. Sign 3. Your perception of reality shifts. Physical objects feel less solid, circumstances more fluid, and your own identity more malleable. You're not just intellectually aware that reality consists of possibilities. You're beginning to experience it that way. The concept is becoming lived experience. Sign 4. Synchronicity now makes sense as a quantum phenomenon. Meaningful coincidences that once seemed mysterious are now recognized as natural outcomes of the possibility field organizing around consciousness. Multiple possibilities collapse into aligned circumstances because consciousness participates in the field's organization of which possibilities manifest. Sign 5. Manifestation becomes logical rather than magical. Understanding that reality is possibilities, which consciousness helps collapse, means manifestation is not a mysterious power. It is a natural interaction between consciousness and the possibility field. You're not creating from nothing magically. You're influencing which possibilities collapse into reality. Sign 6. You stop debating quantum interpretations. Copenhagen, many worlds, pilot wave. These interpretations once seemed crucial. Now you see them as different frameworks attempting to explain the same underlying truth. Reality is possibilities. The interpretation matters less than the recognition that possibilities are fundamental. Sign 7. Mathematics is not required for understanding. You realize quantum mathematics describes the behavior of possibilities. You don't need to solve equations to grasp what they represent. The math precisely quantifies something you already understand conceptually. Comprehension comes before mathematics. Sign 8. You observe quantum principles in daily life. You notice quantum effects operating in everyday experience. Decision-making is collapsing possibilities. Attention is observation, creating definite experience from potential. Relationships are entangled possibility fields. Quantum is not confined to the lab. It governs reality everywhere. Sign 9. Confusion about quantum physics is replaced by curiosity. You're no longer confused, but more inquisitive. Not the "I don't understand" kind of curiosity, but the "I wonder how this applies" kind. Curiosity and exploration replace confusion. Questions become intriguing rather than frustrating. Sign 10. You trust quantum reality more than classical reality. You used to trust everyday perception as real and view quantum physics as a strange exception. Now you recognize quantum reality as fundamental and everyday experience as an emergent appearance. You trust the possibility framework more than the thing framework. Sign 11. Other people's confusion makes sense. You understand why quantum physics confuses others. They're using the wrong framework. You're not irritated by their confusion because you recall having the same experience. You can identify exactly where their framework shift needs to occur. Sign 12. This video reached you at the perfect moment. The fact that you're here, experiencing emerging quantum clarity, is no coincidence. Your consciousness was ready for this shift. The possibility field arranged circumstances to deliver this message when you could receive it. That is quantum physics in action, reality as possibilities organizing around readiness. Now, here is the urgency. Quantum understanding is not merely an intellectual accomplishment. It is a perceptual revolution that transforms how you experience reality and what becomes possible in your life. The longer you remain in confusion, the longer you perceive reality as fixed and limited. The moment clarity arrives, you begin to experience reality as fluid possibility. You are crossing that threshold now. Do not retreat back into confusion. Allow clarity to stabilize. If you recognize 8 or more of these signs, quantum physics has genuinely ceased to be confusing for you. You don't need more study. You need to deepen and apply the understanding you already possess. That is what causes everything to shift, from learning quantum physics to living quantum understanding. Now, let's discuss how to maintain quantum clarity and avoid slipping back into confusion. There are 3 core principles which, when deeply anchored, keep quantum understanding permanently clear. Principle 1. Always begin with the foundation that reality is possibilities. Whenever you encounter a quantum phenomenon you don't immediately grasp, return to this foundation. Reality is possibilities. Then ask, how would possibilities behave in this situation? Almost always, the behavior becomes clear. Confusion arises when you forget this foundation and try to interpret quantum behavior as thing behavior. Returning to the possibility framework restores clarity. Principle 2. Observation is not passive recording, but active creation of definiteness. This shift clarifies the observer effect. Stop viewing observation as a passive recording of a pre-existing reality. Instead, recognize observation as the active collapse of possibilities into a specific manifestation. There is no reality independent of observation. There is only a possibility field that becomes definite through observation. Anchoring this understanding makes every quantum experiment perfectly sensible. Principle 3. Separation is an illusion at the quantum level. Things that appear separate in everyday life are interconnected possibilities at the quantum level. You are not separate from the reality you observe. Particles are not separate from the field they emerge from. Consciousness is not separate from physical reality. It is the experience of it. All appearances of separation are emergent phenomena arising from a unified possibility field. Recognizing this fundamental unity makes entanglement obvious and every quantum correlation understandable. These 3 principles work in harmony. Possibilities, Principle 1, become definite through observation. Principle 2, within a unified field. Principle 3. That is quantum physics, summarized in 3 sentences. As long as you hold these principles as your foundation, quantum behavior will never confuse you again. Here's the practice for maintaining clarity. Whenever you encounter any quantum phenomenon in your studies or in life, run it through these 3 principles. Possibilities become definite through observation within a unified field. Then ask yourself, what would that look like? The answer is usually what quantum physics describes. If something still feels confusing, you're probably trying to understand it as fixed things instead of possibilities. Return to Principle 1, and clarity returns. But there's a deeper purpose to maintaining quantum clarity. This isn't just about understanding physics. It's about living from an accurate perception of reality. When you deeply know reality as possibilities, your entire life transforms. You stop experiencing yourself as a limited thing in a fixed world. You recognize yourself as consciousness, navigating infinite potential. That recognition changes everything about how you live, create, and experience existence. Quantum clarity isn't the end point. It's the beginning of living consciously in quantum reality instead of unconsciously in classical illusion. The physics understanding is just the entry point. What matters is what you do with that understanding. Write in the comments one quantum phenomenon that's now clear to you that used to be confusing, not to show off, but to anchor your clarity by articulating it. What you can explain clearly, you understand deeply. Let's talk about what actually changes in your life when quantum understanding shifts from confusion to clarity. Not just intellectual satisfaction, but practical transformation that affects how you live. Transformation 1. Manifestation becomes natural instead of forced. When you recognize your consciousness interacting with the possibility field, manifestation makes sense. You're not trying to create something from nothing. You're collapsing specific possibilities into manifestation through conscious observation and aligned action. This removes the strain of trying to force reality and replaces it with the flow of navigating possibilities. Transformation 2. Decisions become easier. You recognize every choice is selecting which possibilities to collapse into experience. There are no right or wrong choices, just different possibilities leading to different experiences. This removes the paralysis of trying to make the correct choice and replaces it with clarity about which possibility you prefer to experience. Transformation 3. Circumstances feel more fluid. Situations that seemed fixed and unchangeable reveal themselves as temporarily manifested possibilities that can reorganize. You're not trapped by circumstances. You're experiencing one set of collapsed possibilities, and different possibilities can collapse through shifts in consciousness and observation. This creates hope and power where there was resignation. Transformation 4. Synchronicity becomes a guidance system. You recognize synchronicities as the possibility field organizing around your consciousness. Meaningful coincidences aren't random. They're reality showing you which possibilities are aligning. You learn to read and follow synchronicity as a practical navigation tool. Transformation 5. Anxiety about the future decreases. The future isn't a predetermined path you're traveling toward. The future is possibilities that haven't collapsed yet. Since possibilities can organize in infinite ways, there's nothing fixed to be anxious about. You're not trying to control a predetermined future. You're influencing which possibilities manifest through present consciousness. Transformation 6. The past releases its grip. The past isn't solid fact determining the present. The past is collapsed possibilities that existed in previous moments. The present isn't determined by the past. The present is a new set of possibilities collapsing now. This creates freedom from past patterns and the ability to choose different possibilities in each moment. Transformation 7. Identity becomes fluid, not fixed. You recognize who you are as a possibility that manifests through current observation and context. You're not a fixed identity. You're the possibility field experiencing itself through a temporary identity pattern. This creates freedom to express different aspects of yourself and release identity limitations. Transformation 8. Your relationship with uncertainty transforms. Uncertainty stops being a problem and becomes recognition of possibility. When the outcome isn't determined, infinite possibilities exist. Uncertainty becomes exciting rather than threatening. You're not in unknown chaos. You're in a field of infinite potential where anything can manifest. Transformation 9. Sense of power without control. The classical framework says power comes from controlling circumstances. Quantum understanding reveals power comes from influencing possibilities through consciousness, while releasing the need to control exactly how they manifest. You're a powerful participant in creation without needing to be a controlling manipulator. Transformation 10. Life becomes more playful when reality is possibilities. Life becomes a game of exploration rather than serious struggle. You're playing with the possibility field to see what manifests. Mistakes become experiments. Challenges become interesting puzzles. Seriousness dissolves into curious play. These aren't theoretical benefits. These are actual transformations that happen when quantum understanding moves from intellectual concept to lived perception. The moment you truly see reality as possibilities, your entire experience of living transforms, not gradually, immediately. Because you're not in a different reality. You're perceiving reality accurately for the first time. We've arrived at the deepest recognition, the insight that makes quantum physics not just clear, but life-transforming. Are you ready? The ultimate truth isn't just that reality is possibilities. The ultimate truth is you are possibilities, not consciousness observing possibilities, not a separate entity navigating possibilities. What you actually are is the possibility field recognizing itself through the temporary appearance of an individual perspective. Let me explain why this matters more than anything else you've learned. When you think quantum physics is about external reality, particles, waves, observers, you've missed the deepest implication. Quantum physics reveals there's no distinction between observer and observed at the fundamental level. Consciousness isn't separate from the possibility field. Consciousness is the possibility field becoming aware of itself. You're not a person with consciousness observing quantum reality. Your quantum reality is experiencing itself through the temporary form called person. The entire framework of you as a separate observer watching external reality is the illusion that quantum physics dissolves. At the quantum level, there's just a unified possibility field. And what you call you is one of infinite ways that field manifests itself. This is why the observer effect exists, not because consciousness affects a separate reality, but because consciousness and reality are the same thing at different levels of manifestation. When you observe an electron, the unified field is observing itself. The observation collapses possibilities because the field is determining which possibility to experience through the lens of observation. No separation, just the field exploring itself. This is why entanglement works. Two particles aren't separate things, mysteriously correlated. They're the unified field appearing as two particles. The unity is fundamental. The separation is appearance. When you observe one, you're observing the unified field through a particular lens, and the field responds as a unified whole because it is a unified whole. This is why superposition exists. The possibility field is infinite potential. From the field's perspective, all possibilities exist simultaneously. From the individual perspective emerging from the field, possibilities collapse into specific experience. Both are true simultaneously. You are both infinite possibility field and specific collapsed manifestation, not metaphor, quantum reality. The master key is to stop thinking of yourself as a person learning about quantum physics. Recognize yourself as quantum physics, as the possibility field experiencing itself through a temporary form that's having the experience of learning about its own nature. You're not studying external science. You're recognizing your own fundamental nature. When this recognition lands not as concept, but as direct knowing, everything transforms. You're not a limited person in a quantum universe. Your quantum universe is experiencing itself as a temporary person. You're not trying to understand quantum reality. Your quantum reality is recognizing itself. The study becomes self-recognition. The learning becomes remembering. The understanding becomes identity. This is why quantum physics matters beyond academic interest. Understanding quantum reality isn't just knowing facts about physics. It's recognizing what you actually are beneath the appearance of being a separate individual. You're not in the universe. You're the universe appearing as you. You're not consciousness in a body. Your consciousness is experiencing itself as a body. You're not observing possibilities. Your possibilities are recognizing themselves. Once this lands, quantum physics doesn't just stop being confusing. It becomes the most intimate, personal, transformative recognition possible. You're not learning about external reality anymore. You're recognizing your own nature. And that recognition changes absolutely everything about how you experience existence. The confusion about quantum physics was never about understanding difficult concepts. It was about the magnitude of what quantum physics reveals. The separate self you think you are as appearance in unified field. That's actually what you are. You are possibilities. You are the field. You are quantum reality, recognizing itself. And once you know this directly, not just understand it conceptually, life becomes completely different game. Not more advanced game, simpler game of possibility field exploring itself through infinite forms. One of which is currently experiencing itself as you reading these words. That's quantum physics. That's you. Same thing. What you need to understand now is that your quantum clarity isn't just personal achievement. It affects collective consciousness. And your understanding matters more than you realize. Here's why. Humanity has been operating from classical framework for centuries. Solid things, fixed reality, separate individuals. That framework created certain civilization built on separation, competition, control, manipulation of objective environment. But that framework is fundamentally wrong. Reality doesn't work that way at quantum level. Your shift to quantum understanding, recognizing reality as possibilities, observation as creative, unity as fundamental, that shift doesn't just affect you. It contributes to collective consciousness, transitioning from classical to quantum framework. You're pioneer, early adopter, first wave. Each individual who achieves quantum clarity creates morphic field pattern that makes quantum understanding easier for others. First person to understand had to work hardest because no pattern existed. Each subsequent person finds it slightly easier because pattern is strengthening. Your clarity contributes to making quantum understanding accessible to millions who come after you. But there's more. The way you live from quantum, understanding teaches others without words. When you navigate life as possibility field instead of fixed limitation, people around you notice something different. They can't articulate what's different, but they sense it. And that sensing creates openness to quantum perspective they didn't have before. You're not responsible for teaching quantum physics to everyone. You're responsible for living quantum, understanding yourself. And that living creates field effect that influences collective consciousness automatically. Your clarity raises collective baseline. Your quantum functioning demonstrates new possibilities for human experience. Your understanding contributes to collective evolution. Think about implications. If enough individuals understand reality as possibilities, collective behavior transforms. Competition decreases because unity is recognized. Control decreases because flow is understood. Fear decreases because future is possibilities, not predetermined doom. The shift from classical to quantum framework at collective level would transform civilization more profoundly than any technology or political system could. You're part of that shift, not through trying to convince others, but through genuinely understanding and living quantum reality yourself. The collective transformation happens through individual recognition, accumulating until critical mass tips entire system. Your clarity matters because you're contributing to approaching that critical mass. This is service at quantum level. Understanding reality accurately isn't just personal benefit. It's contribution to collective evolution from less accurate to more accurate understanding of what existence actually is. And as collective understanding becomes more accurate, collective experience becomes more aligned, more flowing, more consciously creative. Write in the comments, my clarity serves collective, not as burden, but as recognition. Your quantum understanding isn't isolated achievement. It's part of humanity's greatest transition from classical worldview to quantum reality recognition. We're completing this transmission. Though really, your quantum understanding is just beginning. Because now that confusion has dissolved into clarity, you can actually use quantum understanding instead of struggling with it. There's one practice that keeps quantum physics clear forever. Here's what you do. Daily quantum recognition practice. Takes 2 minutes. Maintains clarity permanently. Step 1. Remember foundation 30 seconds. Say internally, reality is possibilities, observation creates definiteness, everything is unified field. These 3 principles are foundation. Remembering them daily keeps confusion from returning. Step 2. Notice possibility in present moment 30 seconds. Look at immediate situation. Recognize this circumstance is collapsed possibility, but other possibilities still exist. What's manifested isn't fixed. It's current manifestation of possibility field. Feel the fluidity beneath apparent solidity. Step 3. Observe yourself as possibilities 30 seconds. Notice I am not fixed identity. I'm possibility field experiencing itself through current manifestation. Who I am is fluid, changeable, multiple possibilities. Feel yourself as possibilities rather than solid thing. Step 4. Sense unity 30 seconds. Recognize everything appears separate, but is unified possibility field. No actual separation between observer and observed. Consciousness and reality, you and everything. Feel the connection beneath appearance of separation. That's it. 2 minutes daily. This practice prevents classical framework from reasserting itself and keeps quantum understanding clear. You're not learning new concepts. You're reminding yourself daily of reality's actual nature. That reminder keeps perception accurate instead of reverting to habitual illusion of solidity and separation. Track your experience. Notice, does quantum behavior continue making sense? Do you catch yourself perceiving reality as possibilities throughout day? Does confusion stay resolved? If yes, practice is working. Now critical action. Write 1 word in the comments. Word that captures your quantum clarity. Not thinking, just noticing what word emerges. That word is your clarity signature. Anchors your understanding so it stays stable. Subscribe to this channel as continued support for living quantum understanding. Clarity is beginning, not end. Now you need guidance for applying quantum understanding to actual life. Every video here serves that purpose. And final piece video appearing on your screen is next quantum transmission. You understand quantum physics now. That understanding prepares you for deeper recognitions about consciousness, reality, and what becomes possible when you live from quantum awareness. The next transmission builds on clarity you just achieved. You're not the same consciousness that started this video. You've shifted from confusion to clarity, from struggling to understand to actually understanding, from complex confusion to simple truth. And that shift is permanent if you maintain it through daily practice. Quantum physics isn't confusing anymore, not because it became easier, because you shifted framework from thing reality to possibility reality. And that shift makes everything quantum clear. Welcome to quantum clarity. Welcome to understanding reality as it actually is. Welcome to seeing through classical illusion into quantum truth. The confusion is over. The clarity begins. And once you see reality as possibilities, you can never unsee it. Live from this understanding. Apply this clarity. Let quantum physics stop being abstract theory and become practical wisdom for navigating existence. Reality is possibilities. Observation creates definiteness. Everything is unified field. That's quantum physics. That's reality. That's you. Clear, simple, true. The next transmission awaits. Your quantum clarity needs it. Click it. Continue deepening. Once you see this, quantum physics stops being confusing forever.